Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West. Glen, we were doing a lot of these type of reaction podcasts during the month of January where it felt like you and I were building a special bond, each and every single day hopping on here. And we haven't got to do one of these, like this in this capacity. But LSU does add a transfer portal defensive lineman. Jay'Viar Suggs announces his commitment fresh off a visit to LSU. So, Glenn, let's dive right into it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, folks. Like the video as well. Let's dive right in, Glenn. Suggs is now going to be a part of LSU. Obviously, you see the numbers that he put up at Grand Valley State. I would say a mixed reaction from fans. It's like, thank the Lord we got a commitment from somebody, but what really is the impact that we could see out of Suggs and at a spot where LSU really does need consistent defensive threat?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is it's a necessary addition to the program, especially when you look at just kind of the guys they've missed on in this spring portal window, and the players that they were hoping to kind of bring in and be kind of those instant impact guys on the defensive line. I'm not sure you're getting this in Suggs. I mean, he can be a guy that I think can come in and be a complementary piece to what you hope to do on the interior defensive line. But I think if you're going to be asking this guy to play, every down or significant amount of snaps, you're probably setting him up to fail, and you're probably setting up the defense to fail too. And I think once
Mhm.
LSU kind of missed on the Dominic Williams, Simeon Barrows of the world. You kind of had to readjust your thought on what LSU would want to do with this spot or a couple of spots in the portal that they were hoping to fill with defensive linemen. And I think it's more of a sound approach to bring in guys that you think can maybe push that effort forward by not being the big time kind of instant impact starter, but by being somebody that can come in and be a rotational piece. And I think
Mhm.
they have several guys like that are already on the roster. I mean, Jacoby and Guillory is somebody that, Brian Kelly said back in the spring, he's going to play a lot. Like that's pretty much set in stone that he's going to be out there on the field. But really outside of that, I think it's going to be kind of a mixed bag or a grab bag of guys that you're hoping to kind of help fill that other D tackle spot. Do you consider implementing some more three down, fronts to kind of maybe take one of those interior defensive tackles off the field at times? That's going to be something to talk about. We've written some over the last couple weeks about kind of the internal options that they could go to, and we could certainly touch on a little bit more of that a little bit later in the pod. But just kind of instant reaction, I think this is a guy that can help compete in that room where they just kind of need bodies. I mean, like
Yeah.
I know some people have brought up like maybe that it's probably better to just develop the guys that you have at this point. But I do think that there's something to bringing in extra competition, and you have a couple open scholarship spots, and you can
Yeah.
bring in a guy or two, and maybe they are a pleasant surprise, and maybe they can kind of ingratiate themselves into the system here pretty quickly. And the one thing about this guy that they're bringing in, Suggs, he has a lot of experience over the last couple of years. I know it's a Division two
Mhm.
level, but he's been on the field a lot for that team over the last couple of years, and LSU just doesn't have a whole lot of guys that have seen the field. Outside of Guillory, who's been mainly a rotating piece during his career. I mean, Jalen Lee's never really had an opportunity. Sean Washington coming over from Georgia and then JUCO route, he's never really had a major opportunity to be on the field at this kind of a level. And I'm not saying that Division two is going to be SEC football, but it's certainly a step up from what a lot of these guys have experienced so far
Yeah.
in their careers. And so having somebody with a little bit of experience can come in and be some good competition for those guys, I think is a good thing for this team. And we'll just have to wait and see just what kind of impact he can have.
I know a large portion of our fan base, probably their fandom resides and as yours does in the New Orleans Pelicans. But I was looking at a phrase that I think is going to have to encapsulate, and it's something that the Warriors, the Golden State Warriors, had so many years ago. Now it feels like, but strength in numbers. They're really going to have a strength in numbers approach along the defensive line. I'm with you, Glenn. I mean, look, when we look at the the feel good stories of the transfer portal, this is exactly it. It's a guy who was under recruited, undervalued coming out of high school, and you kind of look at his path to where he is getting now. I mean, look, he did everything he needed to do. He played really, really well. I mean, I know you put the stats in there. A guy that combined for 42 tackles, 14 and a half for loss, and 8 sacks, and then 9 passes defended out of an interior defensive lineman. Those are some really, really good stats. So he's being rewarded for his ability to develop at the level he was. And yeah, it might be a crazy jump. I mean, typically you might think, okay, we're going to go D2. Maybe he goes the FCS route for a year, and then maybe he tries to jump up to the FBS level. Um, with the market where it is and with how productive he was, obviously he's able to, and I say the word cash in, but he's able to cash in on the sweat and the blood, the tears he put in at the D2 level. That's awesome for him. For LSU, like I'm going to be honest, Glenn, I'm still concerned. I'm still concerned about the fact that when you roll into SEC play, that you don't really feel like you have not even the conversation that surrounds LSU right now, not having the typical defensive line that LSU fans feel like they should have, but just not necessarily having an SEC caliber, starting interior defensive line. I think that is a little bit worrisome. And you mentioned Suggs is going to come in, he's going to provide depth. They have to find, even with Jacoby and Guillory, who I know you and I are excited to see how he develops, but once again, is that the hype out of necessity, or is it the hype out of he's really progressing from a guy that can give you 10 to 15 snaps to now jumping into that 20 to 25 snap category? That
Yeah.
is where Bo Davis is going to have to work his magic. I wanted to get your thoughts on that because it feels like, and you mentioned Jalen Lee, Sean Washington, even some of the younger guys like a Dominic McKinley coming in. Like, can Bo Davis really, is it realistic for him to get an entire group, not just one or two, but an entire group to go from playing sparingly, playing, roles to being having to be the guys that anchor a defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, we're probably fixing to find out. I mean, I can't imagine that there has been a situation that Bo Davis has had in his career that's quite like this. I mean, he's probably gonna. I mean, he's definitely gonna earn every penny if he's able to get this group, uh, kind of on track this year and not be kind of
Mhm.
a huge. I guess just kind of weight on this defense. I think
Mhm.
that there's, you mentioned some of the guys there, but I think another guy we could probably throw into that mix is the Wisconsin transfer Gio Paez. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see just kind of what they do with him because I've been doing a little bit more research on Paez over the last couple of weeks, just as we've kind of looked at this roster and said, okay, well, are you going to have to ask this guy to play a little bit more than maybe you were initially thinking? And I think Paez is somebody who, just looking at his Wisconsin tape and looking back at his film there, he talked about it earlier this spring. I think he went on Matt Moscona's show on 104.5 ESPN, and he talked about maybe how he was playing a little bit out of position. They had him more as a defensive end at 310 315 pounds, and trying to make that adjustment as a player coming off the edge more. And so I think now that he's going to be in a more traditional spot at defensive tackle, I'm curious to see if there's an element to his game that really pops, be it playing on the inside. He's had that experience at DN where he's had to be a little bit more agile and a little bit more quick, and he's probably developed his body in a way that could try to help in that way. So if you're able to, kind of get him in there on the inside and see if he can't be one of those run stuffers that you kind of just need as a group right now. I think he's somebody that could wind up playing a little bit more than maybe we're talking about right now.
Mhm.
And then you supplement, right? You supplement Guillory with Paez and Jalen Lee and Sean Washington, and certainly a guy like Suggs who you're bringing in and you're probably hoping can compete for you a little bit. And the one thing I will say about Suggs is he's 6'3", 282. Like, I think there's some wiggle room there to add some more weight on him before he gets into the fall camp here. I mean, if he's able to sign in the summer and kind of spend a couple months in that strength and conditioning program, maybe LSU can get some good weight on him, and they can be a little bit more. They can feel a little bit better about that. But just watching him and watching a few clips of what He did at Grand Valley State last year. He has a very high motor. Like I noticed that watching him. They lined him up at defensive tackle, but they also lined him up at defensive end a little bit on just kind of to kind of switch up their coverages and looks a little bit with Grand Valley. And Grand Valley was also the number 4 team in all of Division II last year in rushing defense. Like they gave up just over 70 yards a game in Division II, which was number 4 in the country for those Division II programs. So again, I'm not saying this guy's going to come in here and be an 8.5 tackle for loss, 7 sack, 35 plus tackle kind of guy in the SEC. But I will say he comes from a program that had some success last year, has some
Mhm.
experience in figuring out what a good defense looks like. It's certainly it's going to be an adjustment for him when he gets to the SEC, but those kind of qualities and traits I think are something that a coaching staff always takes into account, and that's going to be really interesting to see just kind of how he mixes in. But I guess I kind of danced around your Bo Davis question there a little bit, but
No, you know,
yeah,
yeah, you're good.
I think Davis is going to be able to get the most out of this group. It's just what does that look like is going to be the biggest
Yeah,
question I think going into the fall. And that there's a lot of work to be done for sure. I mean, like there's
yeah,
there's no sugarcoating it. You go in, this is still a major concern for this team. You hope that this guy can help. This new transfer Suggs can help supplement your defense a little bit on the interior D line, but you really just don't know because there's just not a
yeah,
whole lot of returning experience on this D line, on this interior D line in particular, which is why I think you have to have the conversations with Paris Shand, with maybe Savion Jones, with maybe a couple of these bigger defensive ends that are going to be playing on the outside for you about occasionally, and I say occasionally sliding in on a a snap basis, 5-10 snaps here and there throughout
mhm,
the course of a game. I think that could really help this group as a whole. So we'll see if what we hear kind of going into the summer and into the fall camp of just how realistic that is. But I think now that they've added Suggs, maybe you look at another option in the portal. I know Brandon Lane is somebody that they're looking to potentially bring in. They've had some contact with him. Um, it sounds like they're about wrapped up with the numbers. Like there's
yeah.
just by necessity, there's really no other names out there that I think make a lot of sense. So I think they have what they have at this point, and now it's just about getting them coached up and seeing how they can develop going into the fall here.
Let's end it with this a hypothetical. Obviously, we know that you mentioned and you teased this about Paris Shan being a guy, and that's been a common name. And Shan told us, like during spring, he had not been sliding really in at all. That makes sense, time and place. But I think now it could obviously change a narrative of maybe what they thought they were going to be able to do in the spring portal window and what they have realistically been able to do. Glenn, we know, and it's been reported that Wesley Walker, former DB at Tennessee and then was at Louisville for spring, entered the portal, a veteran guy, a guy that I got to watch a lot of when he started his career at Georgia Tech, a smart player. LSU was trying to get him on campus for a visit, and that's something big. Jake Olson is a guy that was able to kind of go visit him. For a lot of people that may don't know, there's been some, rumors, some smoke, we'll say, about his stepbrother Tyler Barron, who's a very productive edge rusher, being maybe a point of interest, a player of interest for LSU. Those two guys were kind of a package deal. Barron was at Tennessee. He was able to really coax Wesley Walker to come to Knoxville from Atlanta. But there's a hypothetical where you go back to the numbers game if you don't want, and I think we both can agree that the edge position at LSU feels like a strength, both defensive end and edge. Even if you can add potentially in this hypothetical scenario a guy like Wesley Walker, I believe that scholarship number is at 82. You bring in
Mhm.
a guy like Wesley Walker who can shore up the back end, which we feel like would help up the defense as a total. And then let's just play the hypothetical game and say Tyler Barron says, "Yeah, I want to come too." There's a guy who's a productive, guy that has gotten after the quarterback, and maybe it allows for more peace of mind between Kevin Peoples and Bo Davis to want to slide in a Savion Jones or a Paris Shan. Just kind of your thoughts on that hypothetical scenario. I know that's something that a lot of fans, if you want more information on, you need to come subscribe to Go 24/7. But I feel like that would help and kind of parlays into the idea of sliding one of those guys inside and maybe gives you more of a peace of mind if you can add a guy like Barrett.
Yeah, it gives you peace of mind. It gives you more options for sure to kind of work in there. I look, I think that just from the sounds of it, Barron and Walker, they were both at Tennessee last year. They both had committed to Louisville before decommitting there and kind of entering, or not decommitting, but they had actually signed with Louisville, and now they're back in the portal after the spring. So it sounds like they're going to be a package deal wherever they go. It sounds like they'd really like to play together wherever their next stop is. And look, we had reported earlier this week that LSU had gone in home with Tyler Barron or with Walker, I believe. I believe they
Mhm.
sent Jake Olson out there to go in home with Wesley Walker, and with the hopes that maybe they could get an official visit from him. Don't know when that could be, but they're kicking the tires on it. And like I think that those two guys, you look at Walker, to me, he would make perfect sense in like a star role, like with
Yeah.
what they got Major Burns in right now. He's a guy that had made some plays last year. He was close to the line of scrimmage. He's big. He's physical. Looks like he could be a really good option, kind of closer to the line of scrimmage as a defensive back for LSU. So I think that makes a lot of sense there. And then with Barron, I think, yeah, I mean, look, LSU's looking for talent everywhere. I think on the defense right now, and I don't think they're going to sniff their nose at really any position on the roster right now. I think they feel like edge could be a spot where if you add a piece there, it does allow you to have those conversations with Shan. With I'm not sure if Jones is going to be as open to it. It sounds like
Mhm.
we're hearing that Shan, look, Shan told us in the spring that he hadn't been rotating inside a lot, but this is a guy who has a little bit of experience of doing that in his career, and he said he's been very open. Like he's open
Yeah.
to anything that they want from me. I'll be able to do like that. I just want to get on the field. I want to get some reps. I want to put some good film out there. And look, I think he's going to play a lot of snaps on the edge. I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity at defensive end, but it's really those 5, 10, 15 snaps that maybe you need him to slide in on occasion to help out with this defense and the interior D line with their depth and just kind of their rotation there, where you could see him make an impact. And I'm going to be
Mhm.
very curious to see just kind of what those conversations are like. When we get back in the fall, I would imagine Shand is somebody we get a chance to talk to during fall camp. He's been one of their best interviewers over the last couple of years since bringing him on board. So, yeah, very, very curious to hear about just the development that's made this summer with that group. I am curious though what your thoughts are on this, because like I do think you've tapped into Barron a little bit. I think you have some contact with him or with people in his circle. Just tell us a little bit about maybe what they're looking for, or maybe what they think the opportunity that LSU can provide for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the biggest thing is the opportunity for exposure and kind of that last. I want to be careful how I word it. The last ditch effort at putting on that final part of the resume to go to the NFL. Where can I position myself to get the most exposure? It makes sense, and I will kind of parlay this into the Wesley Walker conversation. From what I've been able to gather, it feels like Wesley Walker is kind of down to a Michigan and LSU. I think, Glenn, we can both understand why he would want to value both of those programs as places where, hey, I'm going to play in some, prime time games against really good competition, therefore getting better film to, give to NFL scouts. Um, when it comes with Barron, you look at the stats. He's been productive. He was one of the more coveted names, and a lot of people kind of forget this. He transferred from Tennessee, committed to Ole Miss for a little bit, backed off that pledge, committed to Louisville out of the portal, and then, like you said, one of the craziest things that I don't think any of us can really believe is he left the team after the spring portal window and now is back in it. But it's an opportunity to showcase one final time what you can do as that last audition for NFL. And I think at a place like LSU, the opportunity. Now, look, we've talked about this. I love the strength of the edge and defensive end room. Like Deshaun Womack is a guy that's got to be one of your primary pass rushers for keeping him in the program and also just for him and how talented I think he is. That's a twofold conversation. But I think that when you look at what Barron brings to the table, it would make sense. And I think that you kind of have to offset, like, we've got 3 spots left if you're Bo Davis and this staff. how can we you mentioned this earlier in the podcast, that guy, that Walter Nolan is not out there. You're not going to find that in the portal. So what makes us a better overall 11 guys defense? Like what makes us better in that category? Okay, well, Wesley Walker makes sense. Maybe Tyler Barron makes sense, to pair with a guy like Braden Swinson and Deshaun Womack to really have a three-headed monster, between defensive end and edge, and those guys can be interchangeable now. So I think that in terms of what they're looking for, what LSU is looking for, I understand why there have been reports of why these two, could join in a potential, conversations and that marriage of trying to say, hey, we both want the same thing. LSU wants to field the best possible defense collectively. We'll go back to that strength in numbers. I think it's going to have to be that, and that's something that Brian Kelly talked about being a difference with this team. And then just in terms of putting the best film on tape, like this is no disrespect. I came from covering the ACC. The ACC is going to offer you maybe 2 to 3 primetime games a year to really showcase against NFL level competition. If you come to LSU or you come to Michigan, now you're talking about 6, 7, 8, 9 games where there's NFL talent on the field. So I think that's what that camp's looking for, Glenn. I think it's going to be something that's very interesting to monitor. And you and I were joking, will we have to hop on tomorrow morning for another podcast about this, or will it be something that kind of transpires over the next couple of weeks? That spring portal window being closed, guys are allowed to take their time. But I would, and I want to, we'll end it with this. I'll turn it back to you here. I think that whether you are a Wesley Walker, a Tyler Barron, or even a Brandon Lane, the defensive lineman out of Stephen F. Austin, it feels like you want to try to get enrolled for the summer because you want to start this process as soon as possible. I don't know when LSU's classes start. I also know sometimes that doesn't matter. If they really need to get you enrolled, they'll find the way and they'll find the means to do it. But it kind of feels like that these things, or that maybe that extra guy is going to be settled here in the next week or so before kind of the summer semester kicks off for LSU academically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be probably ideal, right? Is to get everybody in, know what you have, know what kind of where you can go with this group, and what get them started with the system and implementing the different schemes and all that stuff. But like the weight training and strength and conditioning too, kind of see what you have there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, like I think what one of the trends that we've seen with this whole portal cycle is that these guys have been taking their time. Like they've
Yeah.
really been waiting and seeing just kind of what all the options are that are out there for them. So I don't know how much I can speak to like what a good timeline would be for getting those guys on campus, and when that could potentially happen, how quickly LSU would like this to get wrapped up. But look, Suggs was a start. I don't know that there is a if you were able to get the kind of the Barron Walker duo to come and join this group as well in the spring, I think you look at it a little bit differently in terms of just how LSU was able to make out in the spring portal window. I think those two would come in and be impact players for you. Like, and to get
Mm-hmm.
that this late in the cycle, I think would be an impressive move. But like you said, there's other schools that are pursuing them too. As Michigan is just coming off a national championship, and they've got a ton of momentum building in that program. So it wouldn't be a bit surprising if that's the route they decide to take either. So we could be talking about this for another 30 minutes, and then they come out and they decide, oh, we're going to Michigan. So we'll see kind of how all this develops. But I think regardless here, LSU has put themselves in a tough spot on the interior defensive line. They have to find some different remedies, and I think they're going to look at a bunch of different players and spots on the roster, as far as defensive end goes and edge rushers, to kind of help supplement some of those concerns. And so we'll see kind of what that looks like, going into the fall. What Brian Kelly tells us at SEC Media Days, what we're able to gather during the summer here. So there's going to be no shortage of info, no shortage of stories to tell this summer. So hopefully you guys stick with us, and it's been a little bit of a lighter spring in terms of news for us, but LSU always seems to come through for us in terms of finding some good news to report on and tackle. So just stay tuned, because you never know what can change here over the next several weeks.
Look, it could change in 24 hours. We could get done
Yeah,
recording this podcast and say, scrap it. We got to go record a new one.
yeah,
But no, you're exactly right. Big weekend, obviously, in Baton Rouge. Baseball, massive series. I mean, win at all cost series. You feel like you pretty much have to sweep as Ole Miss comes down Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And that's obviously, too, Glenn. I don't know if you looked at the forecast. We had some bad weather earlier. That's weather pending right now, too.
yeah.
It looks pretty brutal.
Friday, Saturday looks pretty rough.
Ooh,
So
it
we'll
does
see.
not look good. Not look good. And then obviously softball as well, hosting a regional number 9 seed NCAA tournament. So a busy weekend and a good reason for you to stay tuned to the Go 24/7 site. Make sure you get that subscription. Obviously, recruiting. We're going to get into camp season. And then we're going to do some really fun stuff, Glenn, where, my wife is due in now 19 days. So if people want to come talk on the board at 3 o'clock in the morning while I'm up, let's have, some midnight convos, late night fireside chats we can have on the on the board. So make sure you come and join the community. It's going to be a lot of fun for us to talk LSU football all summer long. And Glenn, I was looking at the calendar. One, I can't believe we're almost kind of into the middle of May, late May now, but it's going to be SEC media. It's going to be fall camp season before we even know it. Like it is approaching very rapidly. So make sure you guys lock in a subscription for the great content we produce each and every single week during that season as well. But he is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon. The big news and kind of the headliner of this podcast is LSU does add a defensive lineman, Jay'Viar Suggs. We want to know your thoughts down below, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple, or you're watching here on YouTube. What do you think about the addition, and does it move the needle for LSU's defense? We'll catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.